Paul tells us, reminds us, you are the body of Christ, that is a people, a we, and individually members of that body. And so our relationship is never in isolation. And in order to be an I, a self, a subject, I must be in relation to others. And so what is the significance when Cardinal Wojtyła then suggested that the good has been overlooked? I think practically it means that the things that all people seek have been overlooked, or, to say the same thing, presumed, so that the particular and individual possibilities open to man and to woman have become the sole measure of our conscious seeking. Simply put, we've forgotten that we are first a we, and have begun all of our thinking as an I. Now we all know how this is framed. I enter into social contract with other people. This is the civics that all of us were taught. Except me, I was born in Vancouver, Canada. So you were taught that you enter into contract with each other, a social contract. The presumption, as Hume had it, there must have been a time in the distant past when autonomous individuals made the conscious decision to get together in community. Now we all know that this is ridiculous. The test of it, when I was 3 years old, my family moved to Victoria and I decided to go with them. It simply doesn't work. We're born into a constellation of relationships, and our first reality is not as a self, as an I. Notice how long it takes for an infant to come up with the idea I. Usually the first 3 words an infant says, or at least I was told that I said, were mama, dada, and no. The first assertion of the I. But to assert oneself as an I requires a community of relationship. And we really do begin in the world as a we, as however that looks. It is as a we start out, not as an I. And this notion of a contract into which we enter is simply a rational fiction. There never has been and there never will be the autonomous individual. Now, this forgetfulness of the we exactly prevents our looking seriously at what we hold in common. If there is no we, each of us is merely a collection or a collectivity of I's. There's nothing truly common. There's only a collection of individuals. And this is indeed, I think, how our society thinks. In fact, this has so much become the case that each of us, it's incorrect to speak as we, so I have to say each of us, not we, has been taught that it is not possible to generalize experience. You and I hold nothing in common. My experience of the world is not yours, and I may not impose the thoughts and judgments that derive from my experience upon you. And of course, I will resist to the death that you should impose the thoughts and judgments that derive from your experience upon me. The thoroughly modern man or woman can say with the psalmist, my thoughts are not your thoughts. As far as the heavens are above the earth are my thoughts from your thoughts. Unfortunately, when this is inserted, he or she is no longer at prayer. They hold this to be descriptive not of the Lord, but of themselves. So, individuals, and individuals, moreover, who share no common experience. And so there is a presumption, a glib presumption of pluralism, as if two human persons really cannot share common experience or develop a language that is common. And this, therefore, I think, is the spiritual crisis of our age. We have been inattentive, we've been negligent of the goods that are common to humankind, and have attempted to compensate them by means of our individual pursuits. By overlooking, again, or presuming the presence of the good, liberty, understood as complete autonomy, has become the absolute value. This is, of course, not an idea original to me at all. Pope Benedict argues this forcibly in many places. So, for example, a person who has been deprived of companionship and love will insist upon pressing his or her individual rights, attempting to claim by self-assertion over against others, a good that can only be achieved by means of life in common. If I assert individual rights, if I take my place as an I, what does that mean? What does the word mine mean? Means, most strictly speaking, not yours. It's over against. And so we see everywhere the attempt to strive after goods that are truly common by means of pursuits that are not. So there is, as a consequence, I think, a sort of spiritual reversal, whereby the conditions that safeguard individual initiative, the right to privacy, the right to equal protection, for example, have come to take precedence over the conditions that safeguard the goods that are truly common: the dignity of the person, the safety of a child, the security of family life. These things, again, have been overlooked, have been in a certain way presumed. How that is, I will get to in a moment. But because overlooked, and because the emphasis has become almost entirely in the whole public discourse, individual rights and individual possibilities, it really is the case that the things that safeguard individual initiative have come to take precedence over the things that would secure what is common. There is, I think, a second consequence to the substitution of what is properly individual for what is common, and that is, our society has become more and more polarized and more violent. If we accept the idea that there can be no appeal to common human experience, if we accept this, then there is no basis for confidence that by rational discussion we will be able to discern the social policies that will best serve us, or the legislation by which justice is accomplished and each is given his or her due. Instead, there is everywhere the assumption of a radical pluralism, according to which society is made up of individuals whose intractable positions require to be resisted and overcome. In the place of reasoned discourse about what is truly good for men and women, we are left with slogans and manifestos. Political process then becomes a sort of constrained violence, an attempt to restrain or overthrow one's opponents by force of numbers or by manipulation of the laws. And this, again, I think, is something to which we are witness in my own lifetime, certainly, or since, say, the 60s, when first I began to track these things from a distance in Canada. It really was the case once that the Senate of the United States was filled with men, women, who thought for themselves. It was once the case that the president could, in sending a bill to the Senate, even though a majority of his party held the Senate, he would not be secure that his measure would pass. That time is past. And it really is, I fear, the case that politics has become simply a forum for a sort of constrained violence. Now, up to this point, the attentive listener will have noticed that I have not yet spoken of the common good, but only of common goods, particular things that all men and women seek. But is there a common good? And if there is, what is it? Part of my frustration in the conversation that we are now having in this country, or attempting to have, is that the common good is used by many people, but it seems never defined. I remember growing up at Mass being told again and again that I had to grow in faith, but no one ever told me what it was. And so for a rather long time I was left with a task I didn't have a really very good grip on. What is the common good? And actually this is very difficult to say. And why would we appeal to the common good, one thing, rather than being satisfied with identifying certain fundamental goods that are essential to man and to woman?